Slaves to Darkness, Part 1, Propaganda. For many, and for the most part, it all started with this, and this guy in particular. Yes, there were earlier versions, but most were first introduced with this guy. The Chaos Warrior, whose at the time interesting new take on fantasy armored, big helmet, big shoulder pad silhouette would inspire the Space Marine, who in turn would inspire the Stormcast. To those who turn their noses up at Stormcast for being derivative of Space Marines, respect your Chaos Elders. Space Marines stole it too. Also, Chaos Warriors have only gotten sweeter as time goes on. Like, look at these dudes. Welcome to the Slaves to Darkness faction-focused metal album, featuring frontman Archaon Everchosen, guest starring the Chaos Gods. The last world fell to chaos, and Sigmar and his goodly pantheon thought themselves safe in their new realms. They knew they could not hope to stand up to Archaon and his slaves to darkness, much less the Chaos Gods that blessed them, so they fled, and cowered in the mortal realms, praying to remain undiscovered, and they were, for a time. A reasonable course of action, all things considered. If Archaon were capable, he might even have felt a tinge of pity when Tzeentch's eye happened to cross their worlds. But that would be a lie. When the tendrils of corruption grew enough to allow a full-scale invasion, Archaon and his Knights of Ruin shattered the realmscape barrier and swept across the lands like the shadow of an eclipse. Endless legions of barbarians, insane cultists, and armor-clad chaos warriors in tow. The Age of Chaos had begun. Not simply a warrior wizard who clawed his way up from nothing to be the demigod Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse that he is today, but also a master strategist, and one better than Sigmar himself on many documented occasions, which actually isn't saying too much because Sigmar is extremely stupid tactically. All but one realm, Azir, was decisively brought to heel before Sigmar abandoned his remaining followers and hid, trembling behind the gates of heaven. For the tail end of that age, Archaon split his time between cleaning up the last few loose ends of the realm and working on a plan to open the doors. When the gates of Azir flew open and the Stormcast Eternals poured out, he was, if anything, amused. They made a decent push and established a handful of cities to pray to their weakling gods for succor. But truth be told, their headway was just as much due to fringe barbarian tribe infighting at the edges of Archaon's influence than to some great military victory. Even then, Chaos worshippers outnumbered all other living races put together in the mortal realms, but Sigmar declared it a new era anyway, and called it the Age of Sigmar. For building a few outposts in 2 of the 8 realms? Alright. Doesn't seem very impressive from his throne atop the All Points Gate Nexus, flanked by enslaved god beasts and greater demons commanding billions across the realms, but at least Sigmar will go down fighting this time. Again. Part 2, Models. Updating iconic models with a strong history that are showing their age is a tall order. You have to balance respect for the source, but also bring something new, not too different, but not just the same with higher resolution. For the STD line, they nailed it. Great armor and shields, dynamic poses, and the evil Black Knight theme is never complete without fluffy collars and sweet capes. Modern classics, and solid battle line on the table that can reroll all saves in units of 10 or larger, have a 5-up ward against mortal wounds with Chaos Rune shields, and long reach with halberds, or better attacks with Chaos Great Blades. Kind of your choice depending on what you want them to do. Chaos Knights are your go-to cavalry, complete with mighty steeds decked out in skulls, spikes, and chaos symbols naturally. I use lances always, even on the Doom Knight, as Impaling Charge is too sick to pass up. You can all but hear the drums pumping out double bass when you look at this range. Chaos Sorcerer Lord is a near auto-include, with his oracular vision letting you reroll saves on target unit. Plus, his demonic power spell lets you incredibly reroll all hits and all wounds on target unit, quite possibly the best single combat buff in the game. Not bad for 110 points. The beautiful Gaunt Summoner, a 260 point flying double caster that summons 200 points of demons, so he basically costs 60, and he has a good Horde Breaker spell. Demon Princes, who are just chads all around. Fast, flying, good save, good attacks, +1 to hit on the charge, always strikes first, Mark of Chaos, Hero Aura, plus command ability depending on your mark. Since the unreasonably overpowered Nurgle one got FAQ'd, Khorne is probably the best, which halves enemy run and charge rolls within 18 inches. Might not seem like it to new players, but if you've ever had to roll a 1d6 charge or get stuck out in the open to get dumpstered on the counter charge, you know this pain. Be'lakor is a named demon prince, and while he is more expensive and loses the command ability, he is immune to rend, cast 2 spells a turn, and the Dark Master lets you pick an enemy unit after setup is complete, and once per game choose to sabotage them, with unlimited range, and even if Be'lakor is already dead, by the way. Until your next hero phase, they need to roll a 5-up whenever they want to move, charge, cast a spell, pile in, or attack. And this can last 2 turns if your opponent gets the double. That's a nice 880 point Nagash he got there. It'd be a shame if 5 of his spells failed to cast and he couldn't move. Chaos Lord on Karkadrak is sweet looking, and he's a fine mounted hero if you want your Chaos Knights to reroll charges and hit on 3s. Chaos War Shrine is super cheap for the powerful double buff wagon value you get out of it, with a 6-up Shrug aura and a 3-up prayer per turn from 5 choices that give good buffs plus an extra buff if the prayers line up with the target unit's mark. So many conversion options with this one. I'd put this thing on a Thunder Tusk, but don't listen to me, I'm just a Beast Claw player. Chaos Chosen are older models, it's true, but classic, and they make nice MSU elite good-at-everything buff men, even if they are a tad pricey. When they slay a model, they let any friendly unit wholly within 12 of not just them, but within 12 of any other unit of Chaos Chosen on the table reroll all wounds. Nice network positional buff pillars. You even have weird chaos animals like Mindstealer Spheranx with its powerful Fights Last aura. Also hordes of crazy, interesting cultists from Warcry that are super exciting to paint but have terrible rules and can't have marks, and aren't battle line. So they're like mostly useless except for I guess Iron Golems, but they do make Stellar counts as conversion fuel, especially Untamed Beasts as Marauders. For the icing on the cake, your endless spells are pretty metal and quite good on the table. 8-fold Doom Sigil for the all-important bonus attacks buff on a variable number of units, and Realm Scourge Rupture, which halves move on enemies hit. Deathclock the army has a charm you can really have fun with, even if some of it is old or over-designed. Sometimes biting off more than you can chew is a good path to improvement, and tackling Archaon himself is a fitting challenge to rise to. On the table, he's a fast-flying 20-wound assassin that can slay heroes and monsters outright with Slayer of Kings. Doublecaster who shrugs off spells and mortal wounds each on a 4-up that stack if it's mortal wounds from a spell, dispels endless spells in his way with a wave of his hand, no need to roll, gives you extra command points, enemies reroll 6s to hit him, and his By My Will command ability lets a unit fight before they die so you always get your value. And you can use it out of sequence whenever an opponent uses a command ability. And his Host of the Ever-Chosen Dark Prophecy lets you secretly roll for priority under a cup in your hero phase so you know who gets the next turn well in advance and your opponent doesn't. All this sounds OP, but for 800 points, he better be. Part 3, Playstyle. Slaves to Darkness is Value, Might and Magic Disruption. Your units have solid stats that are ready-made to absorb truly incredible buffs from many sources. There's a reason people worship Chaos, after all. You have excellent heroes with a myriad of solid board and unit control abilities that more than make up for your lack of ranged. Your Allegiance abilities are Marks of Chaos, a selection you make when you choose most units for your army. You don't need to make them all the same unless on one of the battalions that require you to. They just affect what types of buffs the units can get and sometimes how powerful those buffs are. Total Dedication is more for the specific Chaos God factions like Maggotkin of Nurgle or Blades of Khorne. Slaves to Darkness armies tend to have each unit marked, whatever god gives them the most power. Heroes get an aura to go with their mark, and your general gets an extra strong aura. There are 5 marks of Chaos you can give units with that ability on their war scroll, and they are Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Undivided. The hero auras are all wholly within 12 inches and affect units with the same mark. Khorne is reroll 1s to hit, and if a general, add 1 to wound rolls, which is a rare bonus. Tzeentch is reroll 1s to save, and if a general, ignore spell or endless spell effects on a 5-up. Nurgle is unmodified wound rolls of 6 do 1 more damage, and if a general, those affected are at -1 to hit from missile weapons. Slaanesh is unmodified hit rolls of 6 hit twice instead of once, and if a general, you can reroll run and charge rolls. Finally, Undivided is immune to battle shock, and if a general, they get a 6-up shrug against each wound and mortal wound they might take. You also get the Eye of the Gods ability, which is a keyword on your mortal heroes. If they should slay a hero or monster in melee combat, you can roll on the table and get a special blessing from the Chaos Gods, which are mostly good, like summoning a bunch of demons or even transforming you into a demon prince. Super flavorful, but problem is none of your mortal heroes are any good in combat, or have any good ways of getting into combat. And you don't want them there anyway because their buffs are too important to risk throwing away, thus making Eye of the Gods terrible and almost never happen. It's fine though, consider it a bonus that happens 1 every 50 games. Because you also choose a Damned Legion, which act like city subfactions and give you extra powers and a theme for your particular army, and they are Ravagers, Cabalists, Despoilers, and Host of the Ever-Chosen. Ravagers lets all of your non-Demon Prince heroes have a command trait instead of just the general, but no doubling up. Every turn you pick who counts as the general, which opens up some cool tactics. Whoever your general currently is also gets a command ability that summons some crazy cultists, and each general can use this once a game. As for artifacts, Mark of the High Favorite expands your Mark aura, allowing for easier charges while retaining the buff. Kabbalists lets your wizards perform rituals, which include sacrificing nearby models to add D3 to casting rolls, which is very good, but Ritual of Corruption is the combo one. You sacrifice nearby models to move an endless spell a second time, which triggers most of their effects again. Super strong if you can set it up right. Your wizards also know an extra spell that does D3 mortal wounds and lowers the unit's speed by that many inches. It's okay. You have a command trait to improve your rituals, and your artifacts are pretty decent, with a once per game auto unbind, and one that makes any hero a wizard. Deceptively good on demon princes, as they aren't naturally spellcasters except for Bellicor. Despoilers lets your general's Mark of Chaos aura extend to 18 inches, just like Ravager's artifact, and if your general's a demon prince, he gets a 5-up shrug. Not bad. All your demon princes and monsters heal D3 wounds on a 4-up in each of your hero phases, strangely except Mutilex Vortex beasts, who only heal 1 wound instead of D3 even though they were already bad. Also, any demon princes within 6 inches of terrain make said terrain shrouded in darkness and block line of sight. Your Paragon of Ruin command trait is extremely strong, letting D3 units move 5 inches before the game begins, after setup. This is so good for giving yourself a buffer against alpha strikes, or setting up your own. And even if you're only using it to phantom double the speed of Chaos Warriors on turn 1, it's still value. Your artifacts are also sweet, including strikes first if you charge, D3 extra command points, or singling out one enemy hero or monster after setup that your whole army can reroll all hits and all wounds against for the entire game. Target acquired. Finally, Host of the Everchosen is Archaon's personal legion, though you can play him in any of the 4. His Mark of Chaos aura is 18 inches, naturally. Your whole army is immune to Battle Shock, Varan Guard become Battle Line and hit and wound on 2s, and get Circle Blessings, which makes them worth playing here instead of not. In your hero phase, Archaon can pick one enemy unit, and everyone rerolls 1s to hit and wound against that unit, and this can change every turn. And you get Dark Prophecy that I talked about before, where you secretly roll priority and know ahead of time who gets the next turn. Rounding out your Allegiance abilities are your Spell Lores, which are excellent. You have a Fight's Last spell, a Horde Breaker that also stops them from moving, a straight-up teleport, some other decent situational ones. The Chaos Gods hold up their end of the bargain here. Your spell list is straight-up fire, and high on my list for best spell lore in the game. Your battalions are decent at lowering your drops, but expensive, with minor effects, and only include one hero in an army that wants a lot of them, which means STD is going to be a relatively high drop army. Luckily, many of your abilities are tailor-made to help you offset being outdropped or losing priority. You can deal with it. So what does this all mean? Well, you have solid meat and potatoes battle line, strong cavalry, and lots of heroes with exceptional buffs and great spells. A teleport to position how you like, and tons of cool control elements to exert your will and shrink the opponent's options they have available to them. You have so many buffs that it can be tricky to line them all up on the right guys at the right time. But Slaves to Darkness is not a mindless murder-thon. Archaon is the tactical genius of AOS after all, so you'll need to emulate him a bit on the table. Part 4. Stats. Offense B. You have possibly the best combat buffs in the game, but most of your weapons are only damage 1, and your units don't have a fantastic number of attacks, which means you aren't force multiplying into crazy land like Daughters of Cain or Maw Tribes can. It just means your damage is pretty good all the time, as your buffs make your damage extremely consistent. Your Chaos Knights are just about your only source for the coveted Ren 2 damage 2 attacks, but they only have 2 of them per model on the charge, and are a bit pricey. Your Demon Princes are competent in melee, but they aren't terrifying per se, and your mortal heroes are pillow-fisted, even the ones rotting monsters. You don't have any shooting and only a few mortal wounds. Archaon, of course, will look at a 400-point Ethereal Frostlord on Stonehorn and simply delete him with a smirk, but he kind of should for double the points. A teleport is always welcome for getting your damage where it needs to go. Defense B+. 4-up armor, rerolling all saves, 5-up ward against mortal wounds, some 6-up shrug auras, most heroes are on 3-ups, lots of debuffs, some fights last auras, decent chaff and marauders or even iron golems. All in all, a pretty well defended army, though you do lose a few points from being ever so slightly elite in most builds. If an Overlords of Chaos battalion with Archaon and a bunch of Varan Guard, then you are dangerously elite and this rating goes down, even though the individual units seem more durable. Positioning B. Ish. Your teleport spell is of course excellent and gives you lots of points here, but it does cast on a 7 and can fail. Chaos Knights are 10-inch move, pretty good, but Chaos Warriors are only 5, as is typical for heavily armored elite battle line, and you have a large amount of the dreaded Holy Within language on your buffs and auras, which can hamper your movement even further. Without your teleport, you're a solid C, so make it count. Mechanics A-. So your Legion's abilities are basically just buff auras, and the buffs are indeed insane, but your units are too well-rounded to truly exploit them, which is kind of a strange problem to have. Chaos Warriors, Knights, Chosen, etc. are all elite, heavily armored, well-equipped good stuff. However, the best place to put the best buffs is on some stupidly lopsided glass cannon horde unit, of which there aren't great options in STD, which is where the value and disruption comes in. Mechanically, you have the tools to dominate an opponent that falls victim to your control elements. This unit doesn't get where it needs to go. That charge fails. You fight last. I get to fight even though my guys just died. I'm up on points and that unit is Bellicord, so go ahead, take the next turn. When your plans work and the dice go your way on a few of your Corn, Aura, Mask of Darkness, Binding Damnation, Whispers of Darkness stuff all at once, it can really feel like S-tier complete global saturation. And it should. Archaon's won twice already, after all. Part 5, Notes and Target Audience. List building wise, I recommend picking and choosing your gods and marks to best equip each unit with the powers that helps their job the most. Overall theme will arise organically from this starting point. This is one of those times where min-maxing is also the fluffy choice, because selling your soul to the highest bidder is literally what the Slaves to Darkness is all about. They're after power, and they don't care who it comes from, so it makes perfect sense for an STD army to be filled with a Neapolitan assortment of marks and heroes. Remember the immortal words of Conan the Barbarian in his prayer to Crom. Grant me revenge, and if you do not listen, then duel with you. Trivia note, the STD Battle Tome actually has a Conan-inspired quote in it. I do my research. Anyway, as with control playstyles and many other games, they work really well when they work, but everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and things can fall apart when your schemes are thwarted by bad dice rolls, the elusive just shoot the heroes meme except in real life for once, or S-tier durability. You might not have the damage in this army to crack through the most durable units in the entire game, like Hearthguard Berserkers or Mortek Guard with full buffs. But this is an army for tactical warlords, minds that understand that if you can't kill it, you find a way to make it irrelevant. Generals who know when to sit back and collect points, and when to kick them when they're down. And most importantly, to recognize linchpins in an opponent's army or strategy and sweep the leg. Audible footnote: if the aesthetics aren't for you, but you like the playstyle of melee spell control, definitely consider Legions of Nagash or Gloomspite Gits.